She was just a janitor until her secret notes saved a billion-dollar company. What the CEO did next shocked everyone. Before the story begins, comment your city below and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. This one might just change how you see success. Enjoy the story. At 11:42 p.m., the office floors of Henderson Global were dead silent except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the gentle swish of a mop across marble tiles. In the heart of Manhattan's financial district, where billion-dollar deals danced between boardrooms by day, Emily Carter moved quietly in the shadows by night. Clad in a navy blue janitor uniform and worn-out sneakers, she worked with rhythmic precision, her hands scrubbed raw from years of labor. Most never noticed her. She was invisible. But every night she saw everything. Emily was 27, but the weight she carried made her feel older. Life had bent her, but not broken her. Her dreams had once been vast, graduating from UCLA with a business degree, working at a major firm, maybe even running one someday. But then came the call that changed everything: her father dead from a sudden heart attack, and her mother collapsing into a spiral of grief and depression. With 3 classes left to graduate, Emily had walked out of the lecture hall and into a life of survival. Dreams don't pay medical bills. She tried dozens of jobs, waitressing, deliveries, call centers, but none paid steady enough or offered the flexible hours she needed to take care of her mother, who often couldn't be left alone for more than an hour. It was the cleaning job at Henderson Global, offered through a friend of a friend, that finally gave her structure. A graveyard shift, steady pay benefits, and anonymity. No one asked about her past or her unfinished diploma. All they cared was that the floors gleamed and the trash cans were empty by morning. But Emily was no ordinary janitor. Every night, as she cleaned glass conference tables and vacuumed plush office rugs, she studied the scattered charts, sticky notes, and whiteboard scribbles left behind by Henderson's executives. She absorbed it all: the jargon, the metrics, the acronyms. She had a photographic memory and an analytical mind that refused to rust no matter how many bathrooms she scrubbed. Her textbooks were abandoned marketing plans, half-finished spreadsheets, and coffee-stained earnings reports. She often wondered what her old professors would say if they could see her now. Emily Carter, top 5% of the class case competition finalist, strategic genius, they'd once said. But here she was, pushing a mop instead of pushing boundaries. And yet she wasn't bitter. She had made peace with the trade she'd made. Her mother was alive, slowly recovering thanks to her sacrifices. That had to be enough. Her favorite place was the 30th floor, Adam Henderson's private suite. CEO, Harvard alum, Fortune's top 40 under 40. He was practically a living legend in the business world. His office was a glass fortress with panoramic views of the city. She always saved it for last, savoring the silence. Sometimes she'd sit behind his desk for a minute just to feel what power might feel like. Not to steal anything, just to remember who she was before the world got heavy. One night, while wiping down the polished oak desk, her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Mom's doing okay. Ate the soup, slept a little. Emily smiled softly, heart easing. She set her phone down, turned on a low playlist of Motown, and hummed to herself as she cleaned. It was the closest she came to joy these days, knowing her mother was stable and the building was hers for a few hours. Outside, snowflakes began falling against the skyscraper's windows, soft and slow. Inside, Emily danced a little as she mopped. Just a little. A sway of the hips. A laugh under her breath. If anyone saw me now, she whispered, they'd think I was crazy or free. But no one ever did. The office was always empty. Or so she thought. What Emily didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that just down the hall a high-stakes phone call was wrapping up in the executive lounge. Adam Henderson, hair disheveled, sleeves rolled up, was pacing, furious. We lost both accounts, Marcus. Redwood and Orion. That's a $60 million hole. If we don't patch it this quarter, the board's gonna rip me apart. His voice was low but lethal. I don't need ideas. I need miracles. Emily froze when she heard his footsteps nearing. Heart pounding, she slid behind the door. She held her breath as Adam entered his office, slammed his phone on the desk, and collapsed into the chair she had just been sitting in. She watched from the shadows as the titan of industry buried his face in his hands, not with arrogance, but exhaustion. And in that moment, something inside her stirred. The man who ruled this building was quietly falling apart, and maybe, just maybe, she could help him. Emily Carter had learned how to disappear. In a city that never stopped watching, she'd mastered the art of moving unnoticed, especially here at Henderson Global. On most nights, her presence was as ghostly as the reflection in a freshly polished floor. But that night, something changed. She had just finished scrubbing the glass doors on the 28th floor when the hum of voices from behind the CEO's office door stopped her mid-step. She wasn't supposed to hear anything. She never lingered near executive spaces. But the tone, shaken, raw, vulnerable, held her in place. Inside, Adam Henderson's voice was low, but unmistakably agitated. "Redwood is out. Orion too. That's 60 million down the drain," he snapped. There was silence, then the thud of a hand slamming the desk. "If we lose one more, I'm done. They'll gut this place floor by floor. I built this company. I bled for it." Another pause and then softer, "If I fall alone." Emily's stomach twisted. She'd seen despair before when her mother stopped getting out of bed when creditors knocked on their apartment door. But hearing it from a man with a $5,000 suit and a view of the skyline made it feel disturbingly human. Frozen in place, Emily didn't dare move. She pressed herself against the wall, listening through the crack in the door. She had no right to hear any of it, but something deeper than curiosity rooted her there. Compassion, maybe. Or the flicker of a long-dormant instinct, the desire to help, to fix. After a few more quiet minutes, she heard the sound of footsteps. The office door opened and Adam walked past, not noticing her hidden in the shadows. His face was tight expression, unreadable, the weight of a crumbling empire in every stride. Emily exhaled only when the elevator chimed. She leaned her forehead against the cool marble wall. "What the hell am I doing?" she whispered to herself. She should have gone back to cleaning, but she didn't. Her feet moved on their own, pulling her into the office he'd just left. The room smelled of expensive cologne and pressure. His desk was a mess, papers sprawled across the surface like battle wounds. Charts, financial reports, contracts, red-highlighted losses everywhere. The numbers weren't foreign to her. In fact, they whispered a language she hadn't spoken in years. Her eyes locked onto a file labeled Southwest Division. Pending renegotiation. A clause number caught her eye, 13B. She remembered it from her business law class at UCLA. An overlooked escape hatch in certain contracts, allowing for staggered delivery terms to alleviate immediate cash outflow. She remembered her professor calling it the clause no one uses until they need it most. Her fingers itched. On impulse, she walked to the front desk, grabbed a blank notepad, and sat down in Adam Henderson's leather chair like a woman possessed. Her handwriting was fast, clean, and confident. Cut losses by renegotiating the Southwest Division contract. Use Clause 13B. Offer staggered delivery across 120 days. Saves 18% and stabilizes liquidity short-term. She paused. Her breath caught. This was insane. Who was she to write strategy for a Fortune 500 CEO? But the idea had formed itself perfectly in her mind like muscle memory. At the bottom, she added, "Sometimes the solution comes from the quietest corners." She folded the paper, hesitated, then tucked it gently under the computer monitor. She stood, straightened the chair, picked up her bucket, and left like nothing had happened. The next morning, Adam walked into his office, groggy and wired on too little sleep and too much pressure. He tossed his briefcase down, reached for his phone, and saw the note. A crease on his forehead deepened as he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the suggestion once, then again slower. His lips moved as he mouthed the words. Clause 13B. It was real, rarely used, but valid. The figures, 18% staggered delivery. They weren't just guesses. They were sound. He called his assistant. "Priscilla, did anyone access my office last night?" She checked the logs. "Only the janitorial staff, sir. Eco-clean was scheduled. Anyone else? Number logs are secure." "Why?" Adam stared at the paper. "Just curious." He hung up, still gripping the note. His logical mind refused to make sense of it. Who could have written this? It wasn't just good, it was surgical. Whoever it was had business instincts sharp enough to see things even his own advisors had missed. That terrified him and excited him. By noon, the legal team had confirmed the clause could be enacted immediately. By 3 p.m., the new terms were signed, and by 6 p.m., the company had just enough breathing room to stay afloat through the quarter. The tide hadn't turned, but the ship had stopped sinking. That night, during a staff meeting, Adam paced the room, holding the anonymous note in one hand and a fresh sense of wonder in the other. "Someone left this on my desk," he said to his board. "No name, no request for credit, just a solution." Downstairs, Emily cleaned the lobby floor earbuds in unaware that her small act of courage had saved a company from collapse. She was still the same woman in the same uniform pushing the same mop, but everything had changed. For the first time in years, she felt powerful, not because anyone saw her, but because she knew what she had done. She had taken a risk not to be seen, but to be useful. And in a world that often made her feel invisible, that was everything. There was something different about the air that night. As Emily Carter stepped through the service entrance of Henderson Global, the security guard barely glanced up from his desk, but Emily walked in with the quiet poise of someone who had tasted purpose. She hadn't told anyone what she had done. Not Rachel, not her mother, not even herself in the mirror. But deep inside, beneath her utility belt and calloused hands, a spark had been lit. Somewhere on the 30th floor, a decision she made in secret had changed the course of a company. And no one knew. Not yet. The lobby was still. The night crew moved like quiet machinery, vacuuming, dusting, restocking restroom supplies. Emily clocked in, nodded to Rachel, who was organizing mop heads, and reached for her cart. "You seem different," Rachel said, peering over her glasses. "Like, I don't know, lighter." Emily smirked. "I got some sleep, that's all." "Sleep doesn't make you glow," Rachel teased, narrowing her eyes. "You meet someone." Emily laughed under her breath. Something like that. And maybe she had. Maybe she had finally met the version of herself she thought she'd buried years ago. By the time she reached the top floor, Emily's nerves started to hum. She unlocked the CEO's office and stepped inside. Everything was as she'd left it: spotless desk, unopened blinds, silence stretching across the city skyline. But she could feel it, the change. On the corner of the desk was a file she recognized from last night, only now it was neater. Clean lines, fresh highlights, numbers trending upward. Her strategy had been implemented. Her note had worked. Her anonymous whisper had caused a ripple. And the CEO had listened. Emily stared at the folder for a long moment, debating. Her fingers brushed the edge of a notepad she kept in her back pocket. Something inside her dared her to do it again, to trust her instinct. She pulled out a chair, the same leather one Adam Henderson sat in each morning, and lowered herself slowly into it. A year ago, she wouldn't have dared. But now, with the room quiet and the moonlight casting long shadows across the carpet, Emily wrote, "Consider strategic partnerships with green tech startups. Sustainability is more than a trend. It's an investment magnet. The clean energy sector is growing 23% annually. Henderson Global could lead instead of follow." She paused, thinking of her mother, who used to play Latin soap operas while she cooked dinner. With a smile, Emily added, inspired by episode 47 of Ellen Del Verde. "Your anonymous strategist." She folded the note neatly and slid it beneath the Future Initiatives folder. Her hands trembled not from fear, but exhilaration. This was no longer about cleaning offices or collecting a paycheck. This was her mind speaking unfiltered, where no bias or resume could stop it. She picked up her cart, checked her reflection in the glass wall, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's see what happens next." The following morning, Adam Henderson stood in his office, coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept much. Ever since the first note appeared, he'd been consumed by questions. Who wrote it? Why him? Why this company? This wasn't prank advice, it was polished strategy. And now another note. He spotted it the second he sat down. His pulse quickened. As he unfolded the paper, he caught sight of a name he hadn't heard in years, Ellen Del Verde. His mother used to record every episode, sobbing at the drama and cheering for the underdogs. And now here it was, casually referenced beneath a pitch-perfect business proposal. He reread the note 3 times, analyzing not just the words, but the voice behind them. There was confidence, creativity, and an edge of mischief. The recommendation was brilliant. He'd recently read an article on how Google had powered an entire data center using solar panels in Arizona. Whoever wrote this knew exactly where the industry was heading. He buzzed Priscilla. "I want a list," he said curtly. "A list, sir. Every employee who has access to corporate files or fiscal reports. Everyone from executives to janitors." Priscilla hesitated. "All right. What's going on?" "Just get it, please," he said, softer now. He stared at the note in his hand. "I think we've got someone extraordinary in this building, and I want to find them." That week, 3 more notes appeared, each one tucked in plain sight, each one sharper than the last. One proposed a storytelling-driven marketing campaign. Another suggested realigning HR and operations for better interdepartmental flow. A third referenced a soap opera called Amor de Acero and described a strategy of forming high-trust microteams. Adam began losing sleep not from anxiety anymore, but anticipation. These ideas were wild, yes, but they were effective. The data backed them up. Within 10 days, Henderson Global's revenue trend line was reversing. For the first time in 6 quarters, the company was ahead of projections. He started carrying the notes in a folder, reviewing them between meetings, referencing them in strategy calls. He even asked Priscilla if she'd ever seen handwriting like this before. "It's neat, confident, feels feminine," she said. "Kind of reminds me of someone who used to leave notes on my locker in high school." Adam smiled faintly. "It's more than the handwriting," he murmured. "It's the way they think." He stood by the window watching the city buzz below. "Whoever this is, they don't think like the rest of us. They see things no one else sees. They're changing everything." And on the floor below, wearing scuffed sneakers and a cap over her curls, Emily Carter emptied the trash from a vacant conference room, unaware that she had already become the heartbeat of a corporation. Her notes were her voice, her wisdom, her second chance. And though she remained invisible to everyone else, she finally saw herself again, not as a cleaner, not even as a businesswoman, but as a quiet force, a voice in the shadows, a spark in the dark. And she was just getting started. Emily didn't notice the flyer at first. It was Rachel who nearly dropped her phone squealing when she saw it taped inside the custodial locker room. A glossy poster bolded in clean Helvetica shimmered under the flickering fluorescent lights. "Henderson Global is hiring senior strategy consultant. $85,000 starting salary and benefits. Apply today." For a moment, Emily didn't breathe. The words felt like they belonged to another universe, one far above the place where rubber gloves and ammonia-scented uniforms defined her days. But then she saw the description, "We seek fresh, unconventional perspectives. Creative thinkers welcome." And her heart stirred. "You need to apply," Rachel said, thrusting her phone toward Emily like a sword of destiny. "It's perfect for you." Emily shook her head instinctively, stepping back. "Rach, come on, look at the requirements. So what, I don't have an MBA. I don't have a reference from McKinsey. I have bleach stains on my pants." Rachel folded her arms. "You also have a degree from UCLA, fluent in Spanish and English. And you've saved this company's butt 3 times with your little secret notes. Stop playing small." But Emily couldn't look at the screen. Her shame had deeper roots. They tangled with fear, with loss, with the way people had looked through her for years, like she was furniture. That night, while wiping down the 20th floor women's restroom, Emily found herself staring at her reflection for longer than usual. She wasn't just tired, she looked faded, like someone who had once dreamed in Technicolor and now only lived in grayscale. She imagined herself walking into a boardroom in heels and a tailored blazer instead of rubber-soled sneakers. Could she belong there? Could she really break the glass ceiling from the janitor's closet? Back in the locker room, Rachel had pulled out her laptop and was already drafting Emily's resume. "Okay, what title should we give your current job?" Emily blinked. Janitor." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Nope. You're officially Process Optimization Specialist at EcoClean Facilities." accurate and strategic. Emily couldn't help but laugh. That sounds fake. It sounds like what you are. You cut cleaning times by 40%. You reorganize supply distribution. You're already consulting. They just don't pay you for it. Emily watched her best friend type with fiery determination, and for the first time in years, she let hope in, even if it was on tiptoes. When the application was finished, Emily hovered over the submit button like it was a detonator. I shouldn't do this, she whispered. Rachel didn't look up. Why? Because if I don't get it, it'll break me. And if I do get it, I'll have to tell the truth. Rachel reached over and pressed the button for her. Then let it break you. Or rebuild you. Either way, you deserve to find out what's on the other side of this wall. 2 days passed. Emily scrubbed toilets, sorted recycling, and tried not to think about it. But the thought clung to her like static. Then, during a routine vacuum run on the 15th floor, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered. Hello, is this Miss Carter? Yes. This is Natalie Thomas, Executive Assistant at Henderson Global. Mr. Henderson would like to schedule an interview for the senior consultant position. Would tomorrow at 2 p.m. work? Emily gripped the wall to steady herself. Yes, that would be perfect. She hung up. The vacuum whirred beside her, still running. Emily stood in the hallway, where she had been invisible for years, and for the first time, the building seemed to be looking back at her. Rachel went full fairy godmother. She raided her closet for a navy blue pantsuit, steamed it twice, found shoes that didn't pinch, and even applied soft makeup to Emily's cheeks the morning of the interview. Look in the mirror, she said, turning her toward the reflection. Emily saw a woman she hadn't met in years. Strong posture, thoughtful eyes, chin held high. Not the cleaner, not the dropout. The woman who had rewritten future strategies on Post-it notes and changed the trajectory of a billion-dollar company without anyone knowing. Remember, Rachel whispered, you're not a cleaning lady pretending to be a consultant. You're a strategist who cleaned floors to survive. There's a difference. At 1:58 p.m., Emily stood in the marble lobby of Henderson Global, resume in hand, her heart trying to escape her chest. The receptionist buzzed her in. Mr. Henderson will see you now. She walked the familiar hallway in a stranger's shoes. She had dusted these paintings, emptied these trash bins. But today, she wasn't there to clean. She was there to claim a seat. When she stepped into Adam Henderson's office, time froze. He stood from his desk, eyes scanning her face, just a flicker of something behind his cool professional smile. Miss Carter, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. The interview began with formalities, her education, her gap in employment. Family emergency, she explained, voice steady. I took time off to care for my mother. But I never stopped studying, analyzing, observing the business world, even from the sidelines. Adam listened intently, nodding. And what made you apply for this role now? Because I realized I had more to offer than I was allowing myself to believe. He leaned forward. Give me an example of a strategy you'd implement today to improve our operational efficiency. Emily smiled faintly. I already did. 3 weeks ago. You found it under your monitor. There was a pause, a flicker of surprise, then a slow, knowing smile from Adam Henderson. You're the one leaving the notes. Emily didn't deny it. I knew it, he said softly, half in awe. She took a breath. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I believed in the company, and I believed you deserved a chance to see what was still possible. He stood. So do you. And just like that, the walls between them dissolved. No longer CEO and janitor, just two minds that had found each other in the chaos, and now the world was finally catching up. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt longer than usual. Emily's heart thudded with every ding as it climbed. In her hand was a resume she'd nearly talked herself out of printing, wearing a suit that wasn't hers, heading into an interview for a job she had secretly been doing for weeks. When the doors opened, the familiar scent of lemon polish and ambition filled her lungs. But this time, she wasn't cleaning up after the power players. She was becoming one of them. The office looked exactly the same, sleek, cold, immaculate. But today, it felt like something sacred, like stepping into a chapter of her own reinvention. She sat in the waiting area, fingers gripping her leather folder as if it held her entire future. Priscilla, the same assistant she'd once nodded to in passing while mopping late nights, now greeted her with a professional smile. "Mr. Henderson will see you now," she said, leading Emily down the corridor she had walked hundreds of times. Only now each step echoed louder, more purposeful. When she stepped inside the CEO's office, Adam Henderson stood from his desk. His eyes landed on her, not with surprise, but with a quiet, curious recognition. She had been a ghost in this building, a shadow cleaning behind his footsteps, and now she stood before him in a fitted navy suit, with her curls brushed smooth and fire in her gaze. "Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand. "Please have a seat." She sat across from him at the desk she once secretly wrote on. The irony wasn't lost on her. The first few questions were standard. "Tell me about your education. Explain the employment gap." Emily answered with poise, owning her truth without embellishment. "I left school 3 classes before graduating when my father died," she said. "My mother needed full-time care, and I became her only support system. It wasn't a choice, it was what had to be done." Adam nodded slowly, saying nothing, letting her words settle like dust in the sunlight. "But I finished my degree 2 years ago, nights part-time, in between jobs." When he asked why she hadn't applied for a position sooner, she hesitated. The truth was tangled between shame and fear. "Because I didn't think I belonged," she said finally. "Not here, not anymore. I forgot that I was more than my uniform." Her voice was steady but low, and Adam's gaze didn't falter. Instead, he leaned in slightly, like he was listening to a language only they shared. "What made you apply now?" he asked. "Because I realized that sometimes we wait for permission that's never coming," she replied, meeting his eyes. "And I was tired of waiting." Adam opened her resume again, scanning the bullet points Rachel had so meticulously formatted. "You've listed experience in operations strategy and financial modeling, but I don't see where that experience came from." Emily took a breath. "Most of it didn't come from a title or paycheck," she said. "It came from observation, analysis, from cleaning up after meetings and reading forgotten reports, from watching how decisions ripple across departments. I studied this company from the ground floor up, literally." She let the silence hang. "And some of it came from the notes I left on your desk." There it was. The reveal. The moment the mask came off. Adam's lips parted slightly, the corner of his mouth tugging up as if he'd just solved a riddle. "So it was you," he said softly, almost to himself. "You're the one who saved our cash flow. The green tech pitch, the restructuring plan, the soap opera references." Emily's heart hammered. "I didn't do it to get ahead," she said quickly. "I did it because I saw you struggling and I knew I could help." He studied her carefully, then nodded once. "You didn't just help," he said. "You changed everything." For the next 30 minutes, they talked not as interviewer and applicant, but as equals. Emily laid out her vision for Henderson Global, how to use cross-departmental communication to reduce overhead, how emotional intelligence could drive client retention, how inclusion at every level could be more than just a buzzword. It could be the strategy. Adam listened like a man hearing truth after too much noise. He asked questions. She answered not with theory but with grounded insight, many inspired by the stories she and her mother had watched together, lessons dressed as soap operas now repurposed as corporate wisdom. When the interview ended, Adam stood and extended his hand again, but this time with a firmer grip. "Miss Carter, I'd like to offer you the position," he said. "Officially, as senior strategy consultant." Emily felt the floor tilt under her feet. "I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say you'll start Monday," he said with a warm smile. "Say you'll keep changing this place from the inside out." Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she blinked them away and smiled back. "Then I'll see you Monday." As she stepped into the elevator, Emily looked out across the floors she'd once cleaned. Each hallway, each office, each conference room had been part of a life she had lived quietly, invisibly. But now she wasn't just passing through them, she was walking into them with purpose. Downstairs, she dialed Rachel with shaking fingers. "Well," her friend asked before she could speak. Emily closed her eyes, her voice breaking into laughter and tears all at once. "I got it," she whispered. "I really got it." and somewhere high above, on the 30th floor, Adam Henderson looked out at the city, holding the resume of the woman who had once mopped his floors and just rewritten the future of his company. The morning of her first official day as a senior strategy consultant, Emily Carter stood in front of the full-length mirror in her tiny apartment, smoothing down the navy blue blazer Rachel had lent her. The sleeves were a little too long, the heels pinched slightly, and her heart was racing, but none of that mattered. She looked like someone else. No, not someone else, she looked like herself, the version she'd buried beneath layers of self-doubt and janitor uniforms. For the first time in years, she saw the girl who had once aced economics finals and dreamed of boardrooms and breakthroughs. Her mother peeked out from the kitchen and smiled through tired eyes, pride shining through the shadows of illness. "You look like a boss," she whispered. Emily smiled back, kissed her mother's forehead, and whispered, "I'm going to make it count." When she arrived at Henderson Global's top floor, everything felt familiar, yet strangely new. The glass walls, the hum of conversations, the scent of expensive coffee. It had always been part of her world, but today, the doors opened for her. Priscilla greeted her at the executive reception with a smile that no longer carried polite distance. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Carter," she said, handing her a key card. Emily's name was etched in gold on her office door. Strategy Department. Emily Carter. She stood in the doorway, taking it all in, blinking against the wave of emotion. The same room she'd cleaned 2 weeks ago was now hers to shape, to lead, to belong in. But as she sat down behind the polished desk, her mind returned to the reality, waiting after hours, because her first paycheck wouldn't arrive for 30 days, and her mother's medication wouldn't wait. So that night, as the sky turned indigo and the last suits disappeared into elevators, Emily found herself in the 20th floor restroom, changing out of her tailored blouse and slacks into the familiar navy eco-clean uniform. She tucked her curls under the cap, reapplied minimal makeup, and stuffed her consultant badge into her backpack. By 7:15 p.m., she was back in the halls, this time with gloves on and a cart in tow. She moved quietly, expertly, like she always had. But now every swipe of the mop and clang of a trash bin felt surreal, like living two lives stitched by obligation. "You're going to collapse," Rachel said, shaking her head when they met by the supply closet. "Just a few more weeks," Emily replied, her voice low, eyes tired but determined. "Until my first paycheck hits. After that, I'll figure it out." The duality was jarring. By day, she wore heels and pitched strategies that made executives nod in admiration. By night, she scrubbed their toilets and emptied their wastebaskets, praying no one would recognize her. It was risky, but rent had to be paid, groceries bought, and her mother's care maintained. One slip-up, one wrong glance, and the illusion would shatter. So Emily became a master of transformation. She changed the way she walked, spoke, and even breathed, depending on the floor and the hour. No one noticed the quiet consultant slipping into service hallways at night. No one paid attention to the cleaner who seemed a little too poised. It was a fragile ballet, and she danced it with exhausting grace. But Adam Henderson noticed. It started with small things. A gesture, a way she navigated the building, how she seemed to know the exact location of every department, every nameplate, every rarely used side entrance. During one strategy meeting, he casually mentioned a maintenance issue on the 12th floor. Without thinking, Emily replied, "The bulbs near the east hallway are still out. Women's restroom lights, too." The room went silent. She realized too late what she'd said. I passed by last week," she added quickly, trying to cover the slip. Adam tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing not with judgment but curiosity. Later that evening, Adam lingered at the office longer than usual. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but a thought gnawed at the back of his mind. He opened the drawer where he had kept the anonymous notes, the ones that had helped him save his company. He compared the phrasing, the style, even the subtle sarcasm. They felt familiar now. Like her. "It can't be," he muttered, shaking his head. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. He remembered the earring he'd found a few nights ago, small pearl, delicate. Not something a janitor would typically wear. He retrieved it from his drawer and studied it in the light. Then he picked up his phone and called security. I need the list of all female eco-clean staff assigned to the 30th floor, he said. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. The list arrived within the hour. Only 3 names. One of them was Julia Carter, his new consultant, his anonymous guardian, his mystery. No, he whispered then more quietly. Yes. It all made sense now, the voice in the notes, the insight the soap opera references. Her instinct, her brilliance, her quiet presence. She had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. The realization wasn't betrayal, it was revelation. He didn't feel angry, he felt awed, and suddenly protective. But he also knew that if he had figured it out, others could too. And not everyone would be kind. That night, Emily worked faster than usual, hoping to avoid being seen. But just after 11 p.m. while cleaning a conference room, she heard the elevator ding. Her heart froze. It was too late for executives. She grabbed her cart, ducked into a corner, and peeked out. Adam. He was walking toward his office, speaking softly into his phone. She turned quickly, planning to take the back hallway, then froze as she heard him say, "I think I found her." Her breath caught. She dropped a cloth and accidentally kicked a bucket. The noise echoed. Adam turned toward the sound, confused. "Who's there?" he called. Emily ran. She sprinted down the hallway, trying to stay out of view. As she reached the stairwell, one of Rachel's earrings, a tiny pearl stud, slipped from her ear and clinked onto the floor. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. When she reached the street, she leaned against the side of the building, panting, her pulse deafening. Had he seen her? Had he recognized her? She couldn't know. She walked home that night in silence, her hands shaking, her stomach twisting with fear. What would happen if the truth came out? Would everything she had worked for disappear? Would they still see her as brilliant, or just a liar in borrowed heels? Upstairs, alone in his office, Adam found the earring. He held it gently in his palm and sat down, staring at the city lights. The woman who had saved his company twice now walked through his halls, unseen, unrecognized, living 2 lives with grace and grit. And tomorrow, he would look her in the eyes and ask the question he'd been waiting weeks to ask. Not to expose her, but to finally meet her, all of her. The next morning, Emily walked into Henderson Global with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her consultant badge hung neatly around her neck, her coffee in hand, her suit crisp. But inside, she was a storm. She hadn't slept. Not after the near miss in the hallway. Not after hearing Adam's voice say, "I think I found her." The words kept echoing, growing louder with every heartbeat. Was it a coincidence? Did he really know? Had he recognized her silhouette in the dark, the way she ran like someone with something to lose? As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back at her, composed, professional, terrified. Adam stood at the far end of the strategy conference room, arms crossed, watching the team settle in. His gaze flicked to the door the moment Emily entered. She greeted everyone, sat in her usual seat, and opened her laptop with practiced calm. But he could see it now, the quiet alertness in her eyes, the subtle tension in her shoulders. It was her. There was no doubt anymore. He'd found the mystery strategist, and now she was right in front of him, pretending nothing had changed. He admired her poise. He feared what the board would do if they discovered it before he did something about it. The meeting began. Emily presented a bold new logistics plan. The room nodded, took notes, asked questions. She answered each one flawlessly, her ideas sharp, practical, innovative. But Adam watched the way she avoided his gaze, how her fingers fidgeted under the table when no one was looking. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Not in front of them. But when the meeting ended and the others filtered out, he said, "Emily, could you stay a moment?" Her hand paused on her notebook. The silence between them felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. She turned slowly, smiled politely. Of course. When the door shut, Adam didn't waste time. He walked to the chair across from her and sat folding his hands. "I found your earring," he said quietly. Her eyes froze. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. "I also checked the security logs. You were assigned to the 30th floor last month. Janitorial." His voice wasn't angry, just measured. She swallowed hard. Her secrets were unraveling faster than she could gather them. "I can explain," she said, barely above a whisper. You don't need to, he replied. You've already explained it better than anyone else ever could. Your work, your notes, they were extraordinary. Emily dropped her gaze, shame bleeding through her poise. I never meant to lie. I just needed the job. Both jobs. My mom's treatments. The rent one paycheck wasn't enough. I thought I could keep the lines separate. Adam leaned forward. You never lied to me. You helped me. You saved this company. And you did it while cleaning its floors. His voice cracked slightly. You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself credit. She looked up then, and for the first time let him see the weariness behind her strength. They won't see it that way, she whispered. They'll see a fraud. Before Adam could respond, the door burst open. Vanessa Price, head of public relations, and Adam's former fiancée stood there, holding a file and a bitter smile. Am I interrupting? She asked coolly. Emily shot to her feet, her face draining of color. Vanessa stepped inside without invitation, dropped the file onto the table, and opened it with a flick. Funny thing, she said, an anonymous tip led me to review background checks this week. Guess whose name showed up twice in HR and in facilities? She slid a photo across the table. It was Emily in her janitor uniform entering the building at midnight. This little double life might just violate every integrity clause in our code of conduct. Adam stood instantly, his tone sharp. That's enough, Vanessa. But Vanessa's eyes glittered with vengeance. Is it? Or is this exactly what the board needs to know, a consultant hired under false pretenses, a scandal waiting to explode? She turned to Emily. You fooled him, I'll give you that. But you won't fool the shareholders. Emily's throat tightened. She tried to speak, to explain, to defend, but nothing came out. Her world was spinning. Everything she'd built was teetering on the edge of collapse. Vanessa saw the cracks and drove the knife deeper. You don't belong here, she hissed. You never did. Adam stepped between them. Emily earned her place here, he said fiercely, more than anyone in this room. He turned to Vanessa, his voice steel. If you take this to the board, take it with the truth that she's the one who saved our quarter, that she's been fixing the mess you helped create. And if they still choose pride over progress, then I'll walk with her. Vanessa blinked. You'd risk everything for her. Adam's eyes didn't waver. She risked everything first. It's time someone did the same for her. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's expression cracked just slightly. Then with a sharp breath, she scooped up the file, pivoted, and left without another word. The door slammed shut behind her. Emily stood frozen, unsure what had just happened. Adam turned slowly to face her, his expression softer now. I don't care what they say, Emily, he said. You're the smartest person in this building, and you deserve to stay. She looked at him, eyes glassy. I don't know if I can survive another battle. He stepped closer. Then let me fight it with you. In that moment, all the lines between them dissolved, status, salary, secrets. There was only respect, courage, and something else blooming between the cracks. Trust. Deep, hard-earned, unshakable trust. Emily exhaled shakily, her spine straightening again. The unraveling of secrets hadn't destroyed her. It had revealed her. And if the world still wanted to judge her, then so be it. She would face it not as the girl hiding in the shadows, but as the woman who had already rewritten her fate with nothing but a pen, a mop, and the belief that her voice, even whispered, was worth hearing. The email arrived at 9:06 a.m., just minutes after Emily poured her morning coffee and opened her laptop. The subject line hit like a punch: suspension notice, pending investigation. Her eyes scanned the message, each word slicing deeper. Temporary leave violation of hiring protocol, formal review. The mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor, as if echoing the sound of her world collapsing again. She stood frozen in her tiny apartment kitchen, shards of ceramic at her feet, and her breath lodged somewhere between panic and disbelief. She had survived too much to fall again. And yet, here she was, fired without being fired, stripped of her dignity in one click. The story had leaked. Someone, likely Vanessa, had fed the press just enough scandal janitor fakes. Her way to executive office, the headlines screamed. Blogs ran wild with speculation, critics questioned corporate vetting processes, and armchair experts called her a fraud. No one mentioned the night she saved the West Coast contracts, the green tech initiative that doubled their Q2 earnings, or the fact that without her, Henderson Global wouldn't even be standing. In the eyes of the public, she wasn't a strategist. She was a liar who dared to dream too high. And Emily, sitting on her living room floor surrounded by rejection, realized something worse than falling. Falling while the world laughed. Adam tried to stop it. He confronted the board, raised his voice in a room that usually obeyed whispers. You're going to punish the person who saved this company. You think that plays better than telling the truth, that we almost let brilliance rot in a boiler room. But his words fell on deaf ears. Investors were spooked. The media smelled blood. Vanessa watched quietly from the corner, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Intentions don't matter when perception is poisoned, she finally said. We gave her a stage, Adam. She used it to rewrite her own bio. Adam stared at her stunned, not by her coldness, but by how close she came to sounding right. Emily didn't answer Adam's calls for days. She couldn't. What would she say? I'm sorry I tried to survive. I'm sorry I was too good at the job you didn't know I had. The weight was unbearable. Her mother, still recovering, sensed the tension. They can't erase what you've done, she whispered one night, touching Emily's hand. Even if they try. But that wasn't the point. Emily had tried to play their game, follow the rules they never wrote down. But the truth was simple. They never expected someone like her to walk through the front door. Not in heels. Not with ideas. Not with the audacity to belong. Then came the news that broke her. Her mother's medication, expensive essential, was no longer covered under the charity assistance program now that Emily was technically unemployed. The pharmacy clerk was apologetic. There's an appeal process, he offered. Emily nodded politely, left the store, and sat on the sidewalk with her face in her hands. It was happening again. The spiral, the suffocation, the impossible math of survival. She had crawled her way out once. Could she do it again? Or was this how the story ended? Another girl with brilliance buried under bureaucracy. Rachel found her later that evening, sitting on the steps of the building they used to clean. You want to disappear, she said, sitting beside her. I get it. But you didn't climb this far just to vanish now. Emily looked up, exhausted. I don't know who I am anymore, Rach. I was a cleaner, then a consultant. Now I'm a headline and a warning. Rachel grabbed her hand. You're a fighter. That's who you are. And if they won't tell the real story, then maybe it's time you did. Emily stared into the night, the city alive around her, and felt something stir again. Not rage, not hope, but defiance. The next morning she wrote a letter. Not to apologize, not to explain, but to reclaim the narrative. She titled it, From the Janitor's Closet to the Boardroom, the Truth They Won't Print. She told everything: her father's death, her mother's illness, the nights she studied budgets in secret, the notes she left that turned into million-dollar pivots. She signed it simply, Emily Carter, Strategist. She sent it to every major outlet. Most ignored it. But one, The Atlantic, published it within 24 hours. And the internet lit up again. But this time the story was hers. The response was explosive. CEOs retweeted her post. Mid-level employees across industries shared their own hidden stories of being overlooked, underestimated, unheard. Comments flooded in. You're my hero. This is what resilience looks like. They owe you more than a job. Even public figures chimed in. We don't need more gatekeepers, one tweet read. We need more Emily Carters. And slowly the tone shifted. The scandal became a conversation. The shame became a spotlight. And in the noise, Henderson Global was suddenly not defending itself. It was defending why it ever let her go. Adam watched it unfold with awe and a pit of guilt in his chest. He had tried to protect her, but protection wasn't what she needed. She needed recognition, respect, a seat at the table, not a hand to hold. He went to the board again, this time with data, public opinion, and an open letter of his own. If Emily Carter does not work here, then I no longer want to either. 3 board members resigned within the week. Investors called back. And Adam made a final call to Emily. "This time we do it right," he said. "Come back. On your terms." Emily stood once more at the entrance of Henderson Global, her heels echoing across the marble floor. But this time she wasn't walking in with borrowed courage. This time her name was on the building's lips, not as a scandal, but as a symbol. She didn't come back as a consultant. She came back as vice president of strategy. And this time she didn't hide where she came from. She carried it with her like armor. The fall had nearly broken her, but the rise on her own terms became a movement no one could ignore. Emily Carter returned to Henderson Global not through the side entrance or freight elevator, but through the main lobby flanked by glass walls that once mirrored her invisibility. This time, everyone saw her. The receptionist stood when she approached. Employees turned and whispered not in mockery, but awe. Her new title, Vice President of Strategy, was already on the building directory. But Emily wasn't here to bask in a title. She was here to change a system that had nearly broken her, to tear down the walls of class and status brick by brick, and to make sure no one like her ever had to sneak in the back door again. Her first boardroom meeting began with polite applause and stiff nods. But she felt the tension woven into the mahogany table and sharp stares. "Let's address the obvious," she said calmly, standing before the slideshow began. "I came into this company with a mop in one hand and a master plan in my back pocket. Some of you saw that as a threat. Some of you see it as redemption. I see it as the problem." A murmur rippled through the room. Emily clicked to the first slide. Talent is universal. Access is not. Silence followed, thick with discomfort. And then the conversation finally began. Emily's plan was radical, and she knew it. She proposed a program called Inside Edge, offering scholarships, mentorship, and fast-track promotions to support staff with untapped potential. Janitors, mailroom clerks, cafeteria workers, if they had ideas, ambition drive, they'd be heard. No more locked floors. No more invisible brilliance. "We've left too much genius in the basement," she told the board. Some scoffed. One even muttered, "This isn't a charity." But Adam backed her eyes blazing. "It's not charity, it's strategy," he snapped, "and we need it more than ever." Her first town hall meeting drew over 300 employees. They packed into the cafeteria, lining the walls, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Emily stood alone on the small stage, no teleprompter, no filter. "A few months ago I was cleaning this very room," she said. "I've sat in the shadows, unseen, unheard. And I've also sat in boardrooms. The gap between those two worlds isn't intelligence. It's opportunity, and we're about to change that." The crowd exploded into applause. Some cheered, some cried. And for the first time, a custodian felt like a keynote speaker. But not everyone welcomed the revolution. Vanessa, still simmering on the sidelines, had taken a new role in an outside firm and began quietly lobbying against Emily's initiatives. Leaked memos, subtle digs in the media, whispers of stunt hiring, and diversity optics began to surface. Investors got nervous. A rumor spread that a potential merger might be blocked if the cleaner-to-executive pipeline was seen as unstable. Emily found herself back in the storm, her every move dissected, her past weaponized once again. It felt like a trap, and this time she had more to lose. But Emily had learned. She didn't run. She doubled down. She brought in data, success rates, retention models, revenue projections tied to employee equity. She showcased 3 former maintenance workers, now promoted to team leads under Inside Edge. One of them had just patented a new warehouse algorithm that saved the company millions. She stood before the board and said, "You gave me a second chance. Don't deny it to others just because their suits don't fit yet." She paused, her voice cracking. "If you can't invest in your people, then what are we even building?" It was Adam who turned the tide. He arranged a private meeting with the shareholders, invited them into the warehouse where former janitor Miguel now ran logistics with military precision, where single mom Aisha, once a cafeteria worker, now handled client data with genius-level skill. She came to us with nothing Adam told them and gave us everything. He pointed to Emily's original notes framed in the innovation lab. She didn't just fix our numbers, she gave us our soul back. When the shareholders voted, the majority sided with the vision, not because of pity, but because it worked. The victory was quiet but seismic. The next morning, Emily received an email from a young woman in facilities. "I'm scared to speak up," it read, "but I have an idea I think could help the Northeast Division cut waste by 30%. Emily replied within 5 minutes, "Let's meet tomorrow. Tell me everything." One note became 10. 10 became a department. Soon, Emily launched an internal innovation platform open to all employees regardless of role. Ideas poured in, brilliant, unexpected, transformational. And for the first time in company history, the best minds were no longer hidden behind utility doors. Late one night, Adam found her alone in the office, poring over a handwritten proposal from a night shift janitor. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with quiet admiration. "You know," he said, "we're being studied now. 3 Ivy League schools have requested to observe our model." Emily smiled without looking up. "Let them come. Maybe they'll finally teach business students that brilliance doesn't wear name tags." Adam stepped closer, his voice low. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" Emily looked up, her eyes clear. "Every day. And I think about how many others are still waiting for someone to open the door." The next morning, Emily stood before a new class of Inside Edge interns, some in janitor uniforms, some still wiping flour off their aprons. She looked at them and saw potential unshaped by pedigree power yet to be realized. "This is not a handout," she told them. "This is a hand up. And once you rise, I expect you to do the same for the next person." The room filled with applause, with hope, with something deeper, belief. Not in her, but in themselves. And that, Emily realized, was how you truly rebuild a company, not from the top down, but from the inside out. The ballroom of the New York City Grand Hotel shimmered with gold light and ambition. Every table bore the name of a Fortune 500 company. Every guest wore $1,000 suits and 5-figure gowns. It was the annual Global Business Visionary Awards, an event reserved for industry titans and innovators. And this year, a name no one expected sat at the top of the nomination list: Emily Carter, Vice President of Strategy at Henderson Global. Her story, once scandal, then salvation, had become legend. But as she adjusted the simple pearl earring Rachel had given her years ago and stepped out of the car, Emily didn't feel like a legend. She felt like a survivor with something left to prove. Inside, cameras flashed like lightning, and reporters whispered like wind through trees. "Is that her?" one murmured. "She's the one who started as a janitor, right?" another asked. Emily walked slowly past them, chin up each step, echoing against the marble floor. She had earned this, not through shortcuts or favors, but through vision, grit, and grace under fire. Yet deep down, she still felt the weight of the mop she used to carry the sting of whispers behind her back, the night she ate instant noodles while building multi-million-dollar strategies. She had rewritten the rules, but the memory of being written off never truly left. Backstage, Adam found her near the curtain staring at the crowd as the host read the introduction. "She's nervous." The man chuckled into the mic because, unlike most of us, she didn't inherit a legacy, she built one. Adam touched her shoulder gently. "You ready?" She turned a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I don't belong in rooms like this," she whispered. He shook his head. "You don't belong here," he said softly. "You own this room." Before she could respond, her name was called, and the thunder of applause swallowed her fear whole. As she stepped on stage, the lights blinded her. Not from brightness, but from everything they meant. She scanned the room, executives, politicians, journalists, all on their feet. She remembered cleaning floors for men like them. Now they clapped for her. The host handed her the glass award engraved with her name. "Do you want to say a few words?" he asked. She took the microphone with trembling hands, the applause fading into silence. Then she took a breath and began. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said. "Not because I didn't dream big, but because no one thought I should. I came into this world with a father who passed too early, a mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. I cleaned offices for a living. And one night I left a note on a CEO's desk, not to ask for a chance, but to give one. And that note changed everything. The room leaned in. I don't share this to sound heroic. I share it because I know someone out there is still mopping floors believing they're invisible. I'm here to tell you you're not. Her voice cracked just slightly. The world is designed to reward those who already have a seat at the table. But brilliance doesn't come with a nameplate. And sometimes the best strategy walks in wearing a janitor's uniform. A few gasps in the audience and then a wave of emotion, raw and electric. This award doesn't belong to me alone, she continued. It belongs to every overlooked voice, every underestimated dreamer, every woman who was told she needed to wait her turn. I'm done waiting, and I hope you are too. As she stepped down, the ovation was thunderous, but even louder was the internal peace blooming in her chest. For years she had battled the feeling of not enough. Tonight she buried it. Yet the drama wasn't over. Backstage, an assistant from a rival company handed her a letter, an invitation to serve as a guest lecturer at Stanford, a board position at a venture capital firm, and an offer triple her current salary. They're serious, the assistant said. You're the face of modern business now. Emily held the envelope, her mind spinning. Everything she had once been denied was now offered in abundance. But was she ready to leave the company she had helped save? Adam watched her, reading the dilemma in her eyes. You're allowed to grow, he said, even if it means outgrowing us. Emily turned to him, torn between loyalty and legacy. This company gave me a second chance, she said. But more than that, it taught me how to fight for others. She looked down at the envelope, then back at the stage. I don't want to be the face of something, she whispered. I want to be the force behind something. And just like that, her path became clear, not to climb higher, but to lift others even more. 1 month later, Emily founded her own initiative, Foundation 42, named after the number of nights she had worked both jobs to survive. The mission was simple: fund, mentor, and elevate working-class innovators across America. She partnered with universities, created scholarships for children of support staff, and built startup incubators inside housing projects. She didn't want to be just an inspiration. She wanted to build a pipeline so wide that brilliance couldn't be boxed out ever again. Critics called her idealistic, but results spoke louder. Within 6 months, her foundation had seeded 9 startups and rescued hundreds from dropout risk. On the 1-year anniversary of that award night, Emily returned to Henderson Global, not as an employee, but as a keynote speaker. She stood before new interns and old allies holding the same mop she once pushed down the marble halls. This, she said, raising it, is not a symbol of shame. It's a symbol of entry. It got me through the door, but I never let it define how far I could go. And as the room erupted in applause, Emily Carter smiled. Not because the world had changed, but because she had helped change it. From the inside, from the bottom, and now from wherever she chose to go next. The ballroom of the New York City Grand Hotel shimmered with gold light and ambition. Every table bore the name of a Fortune 500 company. Every guest wore $1,000 suits and 5-figure gowns. It was the annual Global Business Visionary Awards, an event reserved for industry titans and innovators. And this year, a name no one expected sat at the top of the nomination list: Emily Carter, Vice President of Strategy at Henderson Global. Her story, once scandal then salvation, had become legend. But as she adjusted the simple pearl earring Rachel had given her years ago and stepped out of the car, Emily didn't feel like a legend. She felt like a survivor, with something left to prove. Inside, cameras flashed like lightning, and reporters whispered like wind through trees. Is that her? One murmured. She's the one who started as a janitor, right? Another asked. Emily walked slowly past them, chin up, each step echoing against the marble floor. She had earned this, not through shortcuts or favors, but through vision, grit, and grace under fire. Yet deep down, she still felt the weight of the mop she used to carry, the sting of whispers behind her back, the night she ate instant noodles while building multi-million-dollar strategies. She had rewritten the rules, but the memory of being written off never truly left. Backstage, Adam found her near the curtain, staring at the crowd as the host read the introduction. She's nervous. The man chuckled into the mic, because unlike most of us, she didn't inherit a legacy, she built one. Adam touched her shoulder gently. You ready? She turned a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I don't belong in rooms like this, she whispered. He shook his head. You don't belong here, he said softly. You own this room. Before she could respond, her name was called, and the thunder of applause swallowed her fear whole. As she stepped on stage, the lights blinded her, not from brightness, but from everything they meant. She scanned the room, executives, politicians, journalists, all on their feet. She remembered cleaning floors for men like them. Now they clapped for her. The host handed her the glass award engraved with her name. Do you want to say a few words, he asked. She took the microphone with trembling hands, the applause fading into silence. Then she took a breath and began. I wasn't supposed to be here, she said. Not because I didn't dream big, but because no one thought I should. I came into this world with a father who passed too early, a mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. I cleaned offices for a living. And one night I left a note on a CEO's desk not to ask for a chance, but to give one. And that note changed everything. The room leaned in. I don't share this to sound heroic. I share it because I know someone out there is still mopping floors, believing they're invisible. I'm here to tell you you're not. Her voice cracked just slightly. The world is designed to reward those who already have a seat at the table. But brilliance doesn't come with a nameplate. And sometimes the best strategy walks in wearing a janitor's uniform. A few gasps in the audience and then a wave of emotion, raw and electric. This award doesn't belong to me alone, she continued. It belongs to every overlooked voice, every underestimated dreamer, every woman who was told she needed to wait her turn. I'm done waiting, and I hope you are too. As she stepped down, the ovation was thunderous, but even louder was the internal peace blooming in her chest. For years, she had battled the feeling of not enough. Tonight, she buried it. Yet the drama wasn't over. Backstage, an assistant from a rival company handed her a letter, an invitation to serve as a guest lecturer at Stanford, a board position at a venture capital firm, and an offer triple her current salary. They're serious, the assistant said. You're the face of modern business now. Emily held the envelope, her mind spinning. Everything she had once been denied was now offered in abundance. But was she ready to leave the company she had helped save? Adam watched her, reading the dilemma in her eyes. You're allowed to grow, he said, even if it means outgrowing us. Emily turned to him, torn between loyalty and legacy. This company gave me a second chance, she said. But more than that, it taught me how to fight for others. She looked down at the envelope, then back at the stage. I don't want to be the face of something, she whispered. I want to be the force behind something. And just like that, her path became clear, not to climb higher, but to lift others even more. 1 month later, Emily founded her own initiative, Foundation 42, named after the number of nights she had worked both jobs to survive. The mission was simple: fund, mentor, and elevate working-class innovators across America. She partnered with universities, created scholarships for children of support staff, and built startup incubators inside housing projects. She didn't want to be just an inspiration. She wanted to build a pipeline so wide that brilliance couldn't be boxed out ever again. Critics called her idealistic, but results spoke louder. Within 6 months, her foundation had seeded 9 startups and rescued hundreds from dropout risk. On the 1-year anniversary of that award night, Emily returned to Henderson Global, not as an employee, but as a keynote speaker. She stood before new interns and old allies, holding the same mop she once pushed down the marble halls. This, she said, raising it is not a symbol of shame. It's a symbol of entry. It got me through the door, but I never let it define how far I could go. And as the room erupted in applause, Emily Carter smiled, not because the world had changed, but because she had helped change it. From the inside, from the bottom, and now from wherever she chose to go next. It started the night the storm rolled over Manhattan, thunder cracking like distant drums, rain blurring the skyline into something soft and uncertain. Emily stood on the rooftop of Henderson Global, her arms wrapped around herself as the wind pulled at her coat. She'd come up there to think, to breathe, to escape the noise of boardrooms and headlines. And somehow Adam found her just like he always did. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped beside her, silent hands in his pockets, eyes on the clouds. "I never liked storms," he finally said. "But lately they've started to feel like home." She glanced at him, her lips twitching. "Only you could say something that poetic while soaking in rain." He looked at her then, not with the usual CEO calm, but with something unguarded. "Only you could make me want to stand in it." They had danced around it for months, this connection threaded through hallway glances, late-night strategy calls, and shared secrets over coffee. It wasn't just chemistry, it was trust. It was the way Adam saw her when she felt most invisible, the way she grounded him when he drifted too far into ambition. But they had rules, boundaries, professionalism, and both had too many scars to risk something fragile. Yet that night, with the city flickering below and rain streaking her cheeks like tears, something shifted. Emily looked at him and asked, "What happens when the person who saves you isn't supposed to?" Adam stepped closer, voice low. "Then maybe you realize saving each other was the point all along." She didn't remember who leaned in first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was her. But the kiss, soft, electric, inevitable, felt like the answer to a question neither of them had dared to ask. It wasn't fireworks. It was quiet, tender, like a truth spoken out loud after years of silence. When they pulled back, her forehead resting against his, neither of them said a word. There was nothing to say. Everything had already been said in glances and gestures, in the way their lives had been orbiting each other's gravity from the moment she left that first note on his desk. But the world wasn't gentle. The next morning, a tabloid leaked a grainy photo of them from across the rooftop, faces, blurred posture, unmistakable. CEO and Cinderella. The headline teased. Emily saw it on her phone while standing in line for coffee. Her chest tightened. Suddenly, the whispers were back. Not about her strategies or her foundation, but about who she kissed. Her worth reduced again, not by the work she had done, but by the man she had touched. Rachel stormed into her office, phone in hand. "You want me to handle this? I'll sue every outlet that breathes your name wrong." Emily smiled through the ache. "No. If I run now, I lose the story I've been writing." Adam called a press conference. Not to apologize, but to stand beside her. Literally. "What Emily Carter and I share," he said, voice firm, "is none of your business. But what she's done for this company, that's all your business." So if anyone here wants to question her worth, start by asking yourself how many empires you've saved with a mop and a notebook. The room fell silent. Reporters blinked. And Emily, watching from the wings, realized that love didn't have to mean sacrifice. Sometimes it meant being chosen. Boldly. Publicly, without shame. That night, they didn't talk about the headlines. They stayed and ate Thai food on the floor and played Ella Fitzgerald records on an old vinyl Adam had kept since college. Emily curled into him, barefoot and calm, for the first time in days. "When did this get so real?" she murmured. Adam kissed the top of her head. "The moment I saw you reading financial reports by moonlight in my office, pretending you were just cleaning." She laughed softly. "You were never supposed to notice me." He wrapped his arms around her. "That's the problem. I noticed you more than anyone." But love wasn't a destination. It was a choice made over and over in boardrooms, in break rooms, in moments of conflict and calm. They fought sometimes about timing, about trust, about letting go of control. Adam struggled to stop protecting her. Emily struggled to believe she didn't have to earn every ounce of affection. But they worked through it slowly, honestly, with the kind of intimacy that doesn't come from grand gestures, but from asking what hurt you today and truly listening to the answer. Their romance wasn't perfect, but it was real. At the 1-year anniversary of the Inside Edge program, Emily gave a speech in the same auditorium where she once announced her return. Midway through, she paused, emotion catching in her throat. "A year ago, I stood here as a symbol. Today, I stand as a partner, a builder, and yes, a woman in love with the man who gave me the first stage to speak from. But make no mistake, I was always ready. I just needed someone to listen." Adam in the front row didn't move, but his eyes never left her. He didn't need to say anything. He'd already said everything by letting her shine. Later that night on the rooftop where it all began, he handed her a small velvet box. Not flashy, not heavy. Inside was a thin gold ring, simple and elegant. No pressure, he said. No timelines. Just a reminder that you are not alone in this story anymore. Emily took the ring, slipped it on, and whispered, "Neither are you." They stood there, New York sprawling beneath them, two survivors of separate battles who had somehow become each other's safe place. And as the breeze curled around them, she knew they hadn't just found love. They'd built it. Brick by brick. Scar by scar. The next morning, Emily woke up before dawn. She brewed coffee, wrote in her journal, and watched the sun rise over the city that once tried to bury her. Adam walked in, sleep-tousled and barefoot, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. She smiled, leaning into him. "How far I've come, how much we've both changed, and how love," she said softly, "was never the goal, but it became the most beautiful surprise." And in that moment, in the quiet before the world stirred, Emily Carter knew she wasn't just rewriting her story anymore, she was living the best chapter yet. Years later, long after the headlines faded and the storm of scandal gave way to sunlight, Emily Carter stood before a room of young entrepreneurs in a renovated community center in Brooklyn, the very same building she once walked past on her way to second-shift janitorial work. The walls now bore photographs of innovators, founders, artists, all alumni of Foundation 42, her life's great work. She wore no heels, no blazer, just jeans, a simple blouse, and the quiet confidence of a woman who no longer needed to prove she belonged. "I used to believe my legacy would be surviving," she told the room, her voice calm, steady. "But now I understand it's what you build once you stop just surviving." Behind her stood a girl named Tiana, 21, the daughter of a single father who worked overnight cleaning floors in Midtown. A year ago, Tiana almost dropped out of school. Today, she was building an app to connect domestic workers to healthcare and legal aid. "Emily Carter gave me a seat at the table," she once said. But Emily corrected her gently. "You built the table, Tiana. I just made sure the door wasn't locked." That was the power of legacy, not in ownership, but in ignition. She hadn't created a pipeline. She had sparked a movement, and now it roared far louder than her name ever could. Across the city, Henderson Global had changed too. Inside Edge was no longer a program, it was part of the company's DNA. Entry-level staff now sat in think tanks. Executives mentored baristas and security guards. The janitor's closet had been converted into a mini innovation hub, and on the door, someone had painted the words, "Where Vision was Born." Emily didn't work there anymore, but her presence remained in every policy, every hiring decision, every act of listening to voices that once only echoed down empty hallways. The empire she helped rebuild no longer needed her hands, it carried her heartbeat. Emily never chased awards again. She declined panels, turned down book deals, even walked away from a major documentary offer. "I'm not the story," she told them. "I'm just the beginning." Instead, she poured her days into forgotten neighborhoods, overlooked mines, broken classrooms where kids sat hungry but brilliant. She wrote handwritten letters to students who'd been expelled telling them, "You are not your worst moment." She showed up to community colleges unannounced and taught guest lectures in cafeterias. She kept one quote in every notebook she carried: "I was invisible once, so I will never fail to see someone else." One summer afternoon, she visited her childhood home in South Bronx. It was smaller than she remembered, the paint peeling, the playground rusted, but something about it made her pause. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded paper, her first Henderson business proposal, written in pencil, creased and worn from time. She slid it through the mail slot with a note that read, "This started here. So can yours." As she walked away, a teenager from the building's stoop called out, "Hey, aren't you that business lady?" Emily turned, smiled, and said, "I'm someone who never forgot where she came from."